Welcome to Bug Banter with the Xerces Society, where we explore the world of invertebrates and discover how to help these extraordinary animals. If you want to support our work, go to xerces.org/donate. Hi, I'm Matthew Shepard in Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Rachel Dunham in Missoula, Montana.
Fireflies. Just the word evokes for many people memories of summer evenings filled with magic and awe. From their flashy mating displays to their glowing larvae, these iconic insects have captured our hearts. Unfortunately, fireflies have started to disappear from our landscapes. What is causing this decline and what can we do to help? Joining us this week to talk about these incredible insects is Richard Joyce. Richard is an endangered species conservation biologist at the Xerces Society, where he works with researchers and land managers to survey for and conserve fireflies, and coordinates many aspects of the Firefly Atlas, a nationwide community science project. Welcome, Richard. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Matthew. It's great to be here, and I've enjoyed listening to the show so far.
Great.
Awesome. Well, to start off, last month we talked about beetles and learned that fireflies are not actually flies, but in fact beetles. But there's something really special about these particular beetles is that they light up. So to start with, can you tell us how many different types of fireflies there are, and do all of them light up?
The short answer is we don't know exactly how many species of firefly there are in the world, but the number of described species, so those with a scientific name that are kind of known to science, is at least 2,400. And there are many species that are still being described every year, especially from tropical regions like South America and parts of Africa. Within the United States, I think the latest tally is 174 named species. And just in 2023, two more species were described. So it's not a fixed number, and hopefully it will continue to go up as we get to know our fireflies better.
Yeah, I find it intriguing. You think that fireflies is a group of insects that we would know pretty well. And yet, as you're saying, we even now we don't know exactly how many species there are, which is, I guess, indicative of the broader situation with so many insects where there aren't enough people looking to understand them.
Yeah, definitely. It follows that pattern for insects. And Rachel, I think I missed the second part of your question about whether all fireflies light up. And it really depends what part of the firefly's life you're talking about. So the vast majority of fireflies or beetles in the family Lampyridae do produce light during some part of their life cycle. For almost all fireflies, that's during their larval phase. There are groups of fireflies that have probably lost the ability to produce light as adults, and they use other processes or functions to do what they would do with light other ways.
So what would they do with light? Why do they light up?
Fireflies light up to communicate. Their light is a message, and the entity receiving that message, or the intended recipient for that message, is going to vary depending on what life cycle, what life stage the firefly is in. So in the first part of their life cycle, when they're an egg or a larva, that glow is telling potential predators that they taste really bad and that they're toxic. So it's kind of like the warning coloration, the bright orange and black of a monarch butterfly, except it's at night. So you're giving a warning signal to predators. The fireflies that light up with a flash or a glow when they're adults, that communication signal is actually for their own species, and it's for communicating with potential mates. So either the males saying, check me out, I would be a great mate, or the females kind of just letting males know where they are, and in some cases actually selecting which male that they want to mate with.
Yeah, and so do different species have different flashes? I mean, if they're looking for a mate, they don't want to get confused, surely.
Yeah, they do. It's kind of I've heard some people compare firefly flash patterns to Morse code patterns. I think another good comparison is to bird songs. So different species are going to have different flash patterns, and those are kind of characterized by specific timing. It's almost like a particular rhythm, and also by the kind of the shape of the flash. So that might look like kind of a trembling flicker. It could look like an upward moving swoosh of light. And in some cases, it's going to be kind of a sustained glow that just kind of hovers over the forest floor.
Yeah, and are there different colors? I mean, I've almost never seen fireflies, at least the light up ones, because where I live in Oregon, we're just in the wrong part of the country. But visiting relatives in Chicago, I've seen them there, and they were green. And I've seen some photographs that have been more yellow. So presumably color helps communicate to the right species as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. The I'd say the most common colors are yellowish green and greenish yellow. That's kind of where things tend to concentrate. But you do have a spectrum kind of from green to orange, or even kind of slightly reddish. And one pattern that you see quite often is that the fireflies that display at dusk. So a lot of people are familiar with the Big Dipper firefly in the eastern and southern US. And this is a firefly that will display before it's truly dark. Some people say that they start flashing when you can still read. You can still read with the last of the daylight. So fireflies that flash at dusk tend to be much more yellow, and that yellow light stands out a lot better against just sort of the light that's reflecting off of green leaves. And then once it's later in the evening and it's fully dark, you tend to see the more greenish glows and flashes. So sometimes that's a different species, and sometimes it's even the same species that will shift its color tone over the course of the evening.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize they could change colors.
No.
Some of them can. Some of them can.
Yeah.
The other factor that comes into play is just our vision. So probably the people who see fireflies most closest to the wavelength that they actually are young kids with really great vision. And then as we age, sometimes it's harder to pick up the color or the weather conditions like fog or water vapor in the air can also shift the colors a little bit.
Because I guess our eyesight is different from the firefly's eyesight, so we must perceive the colors just slightly differently. So
yeah, more than slightly differently, I think, for between us and fireflies. They don't they're not very sensitive to the color red, though they can see it a little bit, and they can also see ultraviolet light, which we can't see.
So you talked about fireflies lighting up at different life stages. So some light up in the larval stage, and those are the glowworms that you're talking about that we fondly know them as.
So yeah, glowworm is a very tricky term because it can mean about four different things. And one of those things is a fly larva. Like in New Zealand, there are these fly larvae in caves that they actually produce like a blue light. So that's one thing that glowworm can refer to. Glowworms can also refer to kind of a firefly cousin also called the railroad worms. where the females look pretty worm-like, and they produce light. But yes, a lot of people will refer to kind of baby fireflies as glowworms because they're wingless and look a little grub-like. And then the fourth thing that that glowworm can refer to is basically a life history type within the firefly family, where it tends to be just the females that glow, and they don't have wings and they look kind of larva-like. And then the males do have wings, and some of them produce light, some don't, but they're kind of flying slowly through the forests or through gardens looking for females. So the example of that would be like the glowworm in James and the Giant Peach. Most of the fireflies in Europe are of this glowworm variety. So the common names for fireflies in different European languages tend to be some variation of things that are worm-like rather than things that are fly-like.
Interesting. And so so within these different life stages, and you have all these different species of fireflies, do all fireflies that light up as adults also glow when they're in the larval stage?
Yes, so producing light during the larval stage is much more of the rule. We used to say, oh, every single firefly, every member of the family Lampyridae produces light during the larval stage. And then a few years ago, it was a good lesson in like not using absolutes. Some scientists found a firefly larva on these mountains in South America that weren't producing any light. And the other really wild thing about these firefly larvae is that they were eating toads. So you have beetle larvae predating amphibians. So, I'm always cautious to say all or none when talking about fireflies. But in North America, yes, most I won't say most that we know of, all the larvae do glow. Including ones that as adults do not produce any light.
Okay. And those would probably be the ones like Matthew was saying. I grew up outside of Portland, and that's where he's located. I didn't see fireflies growing up as a kid because we don't have the adults that light up, but we do have fireflies, right? In the Pacific Northwest.
You do pretty much.
Oh, yeah.
Every state in the continental US has some kind of firefly. And in California and in like very southern Oregon, you have the California pink glowworm, which is this really neat beetle where the females don't have wings, and there are these little pink things that will climb up on a rock and glow this greenish light. There's also something called the Douglas fir glowworm that you have in the Pacific Northwest. And a lot of people kind of in the late fall will stumble across these, particularly the larva kind of glowing in the leaf litter.
I've seen the adult glowworms. Sorry, the adult fireflies that we have in my neighborhood, and so I found them both. Well, in my kitchen was the first time I remember seeing one, but I found them in the garden and also in the local park. I know they don't light up, so I mean, how do they communicate? Because if they can't flash to attract a mate, do they have some other? Well, I mean, because they're not talking, or maybe they are. I'm just not listening. But
so it may be more of a one-way signal for these fireflies. So research was recently done on the winter firefly, which is similar to the daytime fireflies that you have in the Pacific Northwest. That used to be in the genus Elychnia. Really handsome little dark beetles with some kind of pink on the head shield or the pronotum. So they're using chemical signals. So the females will give off some sort of pheromone or chemical signal, and then the males will use their antennae to follow those kind of scent trails through the air and find the females.
Yeah, I mean, flashing must be a little bit limited in a distance, you know, because each has to be able to see. So presumably the pheromones allows them to find each other without being able to see to start with. Is that right?
I think there is some research that suggests that even in fireflies that produce light, for example, the blue ghost firefly, which is a type of glowworm firefly, glowworm in the sense of having flightless females, that they may use chemical cues at a distance, and then once they're up close, light will come into play.
And is the light also created from chemicals, much like the pheromones?
It is. So I'm not the best person to explain the chemistry of it because it's been a long time since I took chemistry class. But it's a chemical reaction that produces the light, and this reaction isn't unique to fireflies in any way. It's found in a lot of different marine organisms and certain types of mushrooms, other types of beetles like the headlight click beetles. But there's basically two chemicals, important chemicals, luciferin and luciferase, both kind of named for the fallen angel of light I think in the Bible, and those chemicals react with oxygen and with ATP, which is the kind of the energy molecule that all organisms use. And then there are a few other chemicals that can come into play, like calcium and magnesium ions and nitric oxide, that kind of help to regulate or like act as a light switch. And the result of that reaction is this light that we see that's very efficient. It produces basically no heat as part of that reaction.
Well, I think you explained that quite well.
Yeah, no, I was
got a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just impressed that the fireflies can control it with such precision that they can flash like Morse code as well.
Yeah, it is.
It's great.
It's definitely impressive, and I think one of the ways that they can control it is basically when they inhale, so to speak, through into their abdomen. Controlling the flow of oxygen can help regulate that.
Wow.
So we've talked a lot about light, and that's often when we see or think of fireflies when we see them lighting up. But what are fireflies up to when they're not blinking? Because it seems like the season to see fireflies is quite short in the summer. What are they doing the rest of the year?
So most of the year and for most of their lives, fireflies are in the larval stage. If you can't picture what a firefly larva looks like, I recommend Googling it real quick. Sometimes I've described them as like a roly-poly bug that's gone through a pasta press, or a tiny tiny pangolin or armadillo. I've heard people call them refer to them as dinosaur caterpillars. So they're these really neat kind of plate covered protected larvae, and a good time to see them if you're in the eastern side of the US, is sort of late fall, is to go outside in the evening when the ground is damp, like after a light rain is really great. And you can find these little specks of light crawling around the ground. And fireflies, before they become adults, they're just eating machines. They spend They spend their nights looking for earthworms and snails and slugs and probably a lot of other things that we have not been able to witness them eat, but soft-bodied little invertebrates. And they're these ferocious little predators. Kind of imagine coming upon a snail that's bigger than you and just shoving your head into the snail shell opening and injecting a neurotoxin, and then, you know, spending the next few hours slurping pre-digested snail juice out of the snail shell. Like that's kind of the life of a firefly, which does not sound like this magical fairy existence that a lot of people might imagine. So when people think about firefly habitat, it's like we really need to think about what the larvae need, because most of their lives are spent as larvae, and that's when they need to eat most of their food. That's how they need to pass kind of lots of different weather extremes. And yeah, the egg phase is like a couple weeks, and the pupae phase. So like kind of like a butterfly and like all other beetles, they do kind of full metamorphosis and hunker down as a pupa for a couple of weeks. Sometimes they build those pupa in little kind of igloos. And there's a species or a group of species that people will, in the eastern US, will often find in the very early spring, like when there's still snow on the ground. If you walk around and check kind of the south sides of tree trunks, you can find larvae that have climbed up the tree trunk, and they've attached their sort of tail to the tree bark, and they're just gonna hunker down and pupate there in this totally exposed spot.
The fact that any insect goes through such distinctly different stages in its life and can be so transformed between, you know, its young stage and its adult always intrigues me. I mean, you obviously know a lot about fireflies, and you must spend some of your time out doing research in natural areas or maybe backyards, I don't know. I mean, what does an evening of firefly research look like?
Well, it's definitely one of my favorite parts of my job, and it's one of the parts of my job where I'm kind of pinch myself when I'm out experiencing something that so many people have such fondness for, and can feel like such a kind of transcendent experience. I will say that I'm often kind of in a frantic state because there's so much to take in at once. So I need to plan my evenings, and I need to know kind of when sunset is, and then I need to be kind of in place where I think I need to be. Maybe that's half an hour after sunset. Maybe it's exactly at sunset, depending on the species. And then I have a thermometer with me that I take the air temperature very regularly, because when I'm interpreting their flash patterns, I take these, I use a voice recorder to measure the time distance of the time between individual flashes of an individual firefly. And it's really the air temperature that's going to set the tempo for that, or be the calibrator for the rhythm of the fireflies. So I go back and forth between holding a voice recorder up to my face while I kind of count flashes out loud, checking a thermometer, and then I'm often chasing after an individual firefly with an insect net, trying not to get into a thorn patch or trip and fall, and all trying to do this in as much darkness as possible, just either with my headlamp off or using a dim red light for just the the smallest amount of light possible.
Wow.
Yeah. Do people ever come up to you and wonder what you're doing out there?
They have, and they're often like really excited to hear that I'm studying
good.
fireflies, and they often have something to tell me about something that they've seen related to these
That's
insects.
good. Because if you're out in a space doing a seemingly odd or suspicious activity, that's often when you attract attention, isn't it?
Yeah, I wear a reflective vest just so I don't surprise anyone. And I try to, get there early enough to let people know what I'm doing before
Oh,
before I'm
good.
stumbling around in the forest with very little light.
That whole experience sounds stressful and exciting.
It's nice to have moments to just pause and take it in as well, between
Yeah.
trying to get photos and notes, and just all the data that I collect.
Oh, definitely. So I've heard a lot of people say that they've seen fewer and fewer fireflies compared to years ago, especially when they were a kid. How are fireflies doing? Do we have any sense of what their populations are, and should we be concerned?
We definitely have reasons to be concerned, and some of that just has to do with the patterns that we see with insects overall, where we're seeing in places where we're paying attention, we're often seeing fewer species and lower numbers of the species that we do see. But it's not actually a simple answer, because we have so many different species of firefly. So just like with, say, birds or butterflies, some species seem to be doing okay. We see them in lots of different places, even in suburban areas or even urban areas, and they seem to have adapted okay to all the changes that have happened in their habitat. But there are a set of species that we're really concerned about, partly because they were pretty rare to begin with. They live in specialized habitats. Some of those are on the coast and are vulnerable to sea level rise. Others maybe live in wetlands and in drier habitats, and we really worry about the impacts of drought. So several years ago, the Xerces Society and various partners that we worked closely with did IUCN Red List assessments for extinction threat for a large number of North American firefly species. And about 1 in 6 species were found to be like definitely at some risk of extinction. And it's estimated that up to 1 in 3 species could be at risk. A lot of the species we just didn't know enough about where they occur or what their baseline population levels are to kind of make any sort of chart of what the trends are. And again, like with many insect species, we're lucky with a few groups, like some butterflies and some bees, to have baseline data from 50 years ago or 100 years ago. But we kind of just need to start now and get as good data as we can get now, and maybe go back to places where fireflies were found 100 years ago and see if they're still there. Because it's not like with some birds, for example, where we have pretty good data going back 100 years for actual counts.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like it's not looking great for many of the fireflies, and for a lot of them we just don't know. But from what we do know, can you tell us what's impact? I mean, what are the kind of things that are affecting fireflies?
So a lot of the things that are affecting other insects are also affecting fireflies. So habitat loss is a big one, loss to to development or to kind of large scale agriculture. Climate change is impacting fireflies in lots of different ways. As I mentioned, kind of sea level rise for coastal species, increased drought or flooding, changes in seasonal climbing, and then also thinking about what fireflies eat. Again, things like drought is not good for the moisture loving prey species of firefly. Other things that are impacting fireflies include pesticides, whether applied kind of in developed areas or in agricultural areas, and in residential settings.
Mhm.
And then finally, light pollution has a set of negative effects on fireflies as well, mostly related to their reproduction and interfering with that courtship communication that they do.
Yeah, because when it's brighter, it must be harder for them to see the flashes, for example. So
Yeah, exactly. A good romantic relationship depends on communication, and when that communication breaks down, it's not good. It's kind of like imagine some sort of great social gathering place that suddenly has construction noise at a really high decibel level. It's like, not going to be the best courtship place.
So earlier you mentioned that we just don't really know what the populations are of these various fireflies. And excitingly, Xerces and other partners work together to start the Firefly Atlas. Can you tell us a little bit about that program and how this can help us to protect fireflies?
Absolutely. Yeah, the Firefly Atlas is a collaborative initiative that lets people contribute to our knowledge and protection of firefly species across the US and Canada. So whether you are just a firefly enthusiast who has access to habitat, or if you work for a state wildlife agency, or maybe you manage a local park, there are opportunities to go out and do a firefly survey, and to document with photos and flash pattern measurements and a survey protocol that we provide what species you're seeing and roughly in what numbers. And we do have a set of focal species that we're really keen on getting more information about. So those focal regions are the Southeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Southwest. But if you're in the Midwest or even the Pacific Northwest or California, you can still go out and do a survey. You'll need to probably do a little more planning and reconnaissance to figure out where and when to do that. And the idea is to create a kind of a map and database of firefly records that can kind of complement museum specimen collections, and that will give us a much better idea of where different species are found, how they seem to be doing, what threats are affecting their habitats. And in just less than 2 years, it's been really exciting to see young people out there doing surveys and contributing to our knowledge, finding firefly species in states where we didn't know that they occurred.
Wow.
It's really helping, I think, the state agencies get a better handle on just the basic information of what species do we have here, where are they found, which ones should we be kind of keeping a close eye on to make sure that they don't decline or blink out.
And so if our listeners wanted to get involved with the Firefly Atlas, how can they sign up?
So going to fireflyatlas.org, you can create an account, which will then allow you to submit data. You can also sign up for our newsletter and just keep tabs on what's been going on with the Firefly Atlas project. And even if for whatever reason doing surveys isn't going to be possible for you, there are resources where you can sort of create a checklist of species that are found in your state and read about the different species that are most at risk. There's a lot of just educational resources about fireflies on the website.
Yeah, and people who want to help out, they don't need any special background. I mean, if you just want to help, you can just sign up, right?
You can sign up. They're kind of like with the Bumblebee Atlas projects. There are a few pieces of equipment that you'll want, like a camera and probably an insect net. And it does take a fair amount of kind of doing your homework to learn the survey protocol. We have some training videos available on the website. And then a really important thing too is having really clear communication with whoever's land you're doing the Firefly surveys on, and following the Xerces Society community conduct, code of conduct for community science.
Yeah.
So you've talked about lots of different things that are impacting fireflies, like light pollution and climate change. And obviously we've talked about the Firefly Atlas, but are there one or two things and simple things that people can do to help fireflies?
One thing, and this might sound a little strange, is just go outside at night. And there are a few things that you can do when you do that. One is just sort of like take in, if you have fireflies near you, spend a little more time watching them and appreciating them. And, if you're doing that with someone else in your community, like all the better. I think fireflies can bring so much joy that my first suggestion is like tap into that joy and that like sense of awe. The other thing that you'll notice when you go outside at night is there may be things that are interfering with your enjoyment of fireflies, and sometimes that is a light post or other outdoor lighting. And even if you don't have a garden that's supporting firefly habitat, you can find out more about your town or your state's outdoor lighting kind of regulations and best practices, and you can encourage your local government to take wildlife into consideration when doing planning of outdoor lighting. And then I'm probably going over here too many things, but the third thing I would say is be curious about how pesticides are being used in your community. So that might be neighbors doing a lot of backyard spraying because of mosquitoes or ticks, and maybe they could be doing that in a much more strategic way, following kind of more insect-friendly mosquito management practices. Or maybe it's how your local community government is responding to mosquitoes. And just making sure that they're following the best practices for balancing public health and protecting wildlife and
Mhm.
insects, including fireflies.
That's great. I love your first piece of advice there. Getting people to go out and just enjoy is such a great thing. So
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
think, a lot of people say like, oh, I don't see fireflies anymore. And it's, I think, declines and local extinctions of fireflies are part of that. But part of it is also people not going outside at night as much. And when we find, we're going to be most excited about protecting fireflies when we know that they're there in our communities and we're enjoying and valuing them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we're going to end here on my favorite question. And that is, what inspired you to work with fireflies?
I mean, how could I not work with fireflies? I'll say that I had the opportunity several years ago before I joined Xerces to work with volunteers at a national park in South Carolina, Congaree National Park, to collect some data on the synchronizing firefly, Photurus frontalis. And I just got hooked to get to again be out at night, both enjoying this beautiful site and protecting biodiversity is just what a combination,
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Richard. It was great talking with you and learning more about these incredible insects.
Thank you for having me on.
Bug Banter is brought to you by the Xerces Society, a donor-based nonprofit that is working to protect insects and other invertebrates, the life that sustains us. If you are already a donor, thank you so much. If you want to support our work, go to xerces.org/donate. For information about this podcast and for show notes, go to xerces.org/bugbanter.